So we're going to talk about moist cooking methods. We want to start here with why we use moist cooking. So moist cooking methods, they use water or steam. They are used to emphasize the natural flavors of food items, and they're used to tenderize tough cuts of meat. They are also used to soften hard starch or grain items. So in lesson 1, we talked about gelatinization. And so gelatinization are when these starches soak up liquid and then they swell up and then they get soft. So with the science of moist cooking, we look at moist cooking using liquids that are not oils. And so examples of that are water, stock or broth, like chicken stock is common, tomato juice, steam, or they're even acidic liquids like lemon juice or vinegars, or wine or beer is also really common to use in moist cooking. But essentially, any of these water-based liquids are only looking at a temperature of around 212 degrees. That's the boiling point. That temperature is not high enough to create a browning effect. So we've been really talking about that quite a bit, but we still use moist cooking in cooking a lot. We just have to know that we are not ever going to develop flavor. We are really just tenderizing. So here are the moist cooking methods. In this video, I'm going to focus on these first ones here. So I'm going to cover cooking in liquid, so completely and totally in the liquid. So the first one here is poaching. This is the lowest temperature of cooking in liquid. So with poaching, the food is submerged in the liquid, and the liquid is only 160 to 180. And so with poaching, you won't really see bubbles breaking the surface. You can do it in water. It's really common to do like eggs, like you see pictured here in water, but you can also use a flavored liquid as well. Poaching is only going to be for foods that are already tender. So eggs, chicken, or seafood, like chicken breasts, not bone-in chicken, or seafood. Salmon is really common, and whitefish. So fish is good for it, shrimp, and eggs are the most common. Shallow poaching is a little different than poaching because the food is not completely submerged. It's only partially colored by the liquid. So in this one, you're going to use portion-sized or small pieces, kind of like what you see here. And this one is going to use a combination of steam and liquid. So the food is only going to be partially submerged in the liquid that's not cooking at a very high temperature. And generally, that liquid does have an acid in it. So wine or lemon juice is the most common. But essentially, steam and the combination of kind of sitting in that liquid partially is what cooks the food. So this is going to make things really tender and really moist. This is most commonly used for, pardon me if I mispronounce this French word, papettes. So this term here, papettes, is essentially you take long, thin slices of fish or meat. It's very common with a whitefish, and you stuff it with a filling. And so you wrap it around the filling, and then you tie it up. So this photograph here would show you the little bundle of these papettes. You can then use the liquid that they were cooked in to create a sauce. So we're going to talk a lot more about sauce creation. But in shallow poaching, this would be a way to make a really nice dish. And this is also a pretty inexpensive way to provide something that is kind of fancy. So when it comes to shallow poaching, you're cooking food items in liquid that'll essentially kind of become a sauce. So you heat some butter in the pan is really common. Add your seasoning, add your poaching liquid, bring it up to temperature, add your food item like you see here. This is a piece of salmon going in, and then cover your saucepan. So when it comes to making the sauce, you generally remove the meat or whatever, and then you raise that heat up, and you take the meat out of the poaching pan, and then you turn the heat up quite a bit to reduce that poaching liquid, and then that creates a sauce. And so that's a really quick thing because you don't have a lot of liquid, so the evaporation and the reduction is going to happen really quickly. Simmering is the next level cooking method and very commonly used. This one, food is completely submerged in liquid. And so this is still liquid held below the boiling point. And so we have little bitty bubbles that gently break the surface. This is not going to be for a very high heat item. So this typically would involve like a well-flavored liquid, making a soup or stew. The process of simmering will soften less tender cuts of meat. So again, making like soups or stew. So you have small bubbles gently rising and breaking the surface. And it's really important that you note, do not boil. So items that need to be simmered need to be kept at a simmer. There's quite a few chemical changes that occur in food items when you boil them, when they cook too hard and fast. Doing potatoes for mashed potatoes, eggs, like people refer to as like hard boiled eggs, really don't need to boil the eggs. They should also be simmered as well. So I have an additional video on simmering versus boiling and the science of it that kind of breaks down a little bit about what actually happens and why you should pay very good attention when you're simmering and not boiling. This is also important when we get into the stock making. Simmering is also really important to use for foods with high sugar or starch content. So if you have something like chili, tomato juice, mashed potatoes, a thick cream-based soup. These things can burn on the bottom and you can scorch them. So you want to make sure you keep it at a simmer. Don't boil your chili. Keep it real low. And then the last one here is boiling. Boiling is high heat and big bubbles. And so this temperature is 212. This uses a large amount of rapidly bubbling liquids, and you've got big bubbles breaking the surface. Typically, if you're doing starches like potatoes or pasta, I think under the picture it actually says pasta. It's not really recommended to use a lid because you can cause boil over. But if you're doing green vegetables like broccoli, if you choose to boil them, then you do want to put a lid on them.